For decades, researchers at the University of Virginia have investigated thousands of children who claim to remember previous lives. These aren't vague memories or fantasies. Children provide specific verifiable details about people who died before they were born. Names, addresses, family members, and events they could not possibly know. When investigated, many details prove accurate. Scientists cannot fully explain these cases. These are 10 documented cases of children who remembered impossible past lives, challenging our understanding of consciousness and memory. Case number 1, James Leininger. WWII Pilot Memories. James Leininger was born in April 1998 in San Francisco. At age 2, he began having violent nightmares, screaming about airplane crashes and being trapped in fire. His parents, Bruce and Andrea, initially thought these were normal childhood bad dreams, but the nightmares intensified and James began providing specific details about World War II aircraft and combat that a toddler should not know. James became obsessed with toy airplanes, particularly World War II fighters. He identified aircraft types correctly, including obscure models. He knew technical details about planes. He drew pictures of air battles with remarkable accuracy for his age. During nightmares, he would scream that his plane had been shot down by the Japanese, and he couldn't get out. He said his plane took off from a boat and that the boat was named Natoma. James told his parents his name had been James and he flew a Corsair. He said he was shot down at Iwo Jima. He mentioned a pilot named Jack Larsen. Bruce Leininger initially dismissed this as imagination, but the specific details troubled him. He began researching World War II Pacific theater combat. He discovered the USS Natoma Bay was an escort carrier in the Pacific. Jack Larsen had been a real pilot who served on the Natoma Bay. Further research revealed that only one pilot from the Natoma Bay was killed at Iwo Jima. His name was James Huston Jr. He died on March 3, 1945, when his FM-2 Wildcat, not a Corsair, was shot down during the Battle of Iwo Jima. James Leininger had correctly identified the carrier name, the location, and another pilot from the same squadron. The only error was the aircraft type, though young children often confuse similar planes. Bruce contacted members of James Huston's squadron who were still alive. They confirmed details James Leininger had mentioned. James even identified men from reunion photos he'd never seen. The squadron members were shocked by the child's knowledge. Some found it disturbing. Others believed James was somehow connected to their fallen comrade. As James grew older, the memories faded. The nightmares stopped. He became a normal child with no interest in World War II, but the documented evidence remains. James provided over 50 verifiable details about James Huston's life and death. Details a toddler in Louisiana had no conventional way of knowing. The case was investigated by Dr. Jim Tucker at the University of Virginia, who found no evidence of fraud. Whether James somehow accessed James Huston's memories, or whether this represents something science cannot yet explain, remains an open mystery. The case is one of the most thoroughly documented examples of past life memory in Western countries. Case number 2, Ryan Hammons, Hollywood. Golden Age Memories. Ryan Hammons was born in 2004 in Oklahoma. Around age 4, he began having nightmares and making strange statements to his mother, Cindy. He talked about going home to Hollywood. He described a big white house and a swimming pool. He spoke about dancing on Broadway and appearing in movies. Ryan insisted this was real, not make-believe. His Baptist mother found this disturbing, particularly when Ryan talked about his previous life. Ryan provided numerous specific details. He said he had 3 sons in his past life. He mentioned changing his name. He described working for an agency where people change their names. He talked about dancing in Broadway productions and traveling overseas. He remembered a specific street address on North Roxbury Drive in Beverly Hills. These details were far too specific to be childhood imagination, particularly from a boy growing up in rural Oklahoma with no exposure to Hollywood history. Cindy showed Ryan books about Hollywood, hoping to distract him. In one book about old Hollywood, Ryan pointed to a photograph and exclaimed that was him. The photo showed a scene from a 1932 film called Night After Night. Ryan had pointed to an extra in the background, not one of the credited stars. Cindy had no idea who this person was. The man wasn't identified in the caption. Cindy contacted Dr. Jim Tucker at the University of Virginia, who investigates such cases. Tucker worked with a film archivist to identify the man in the photograph. It took months of research. Eventually, they identified him as Martyn, a Hollywood extra who became a successful talent agent. Tucker obtained Martyn's death certificate and other records, then interviewed Ryan without telling him what they'd found. Ryan's statements matched Martyn's life with remarkable accuracy. Martyn had changed his name from Morris Kalinsky when he entered show business exactly as Ryan described. He worked as a dancer on Broadway before moving to Hollywood. He had 3 sons through 2 marriages. He worked as a talent agent representing actors and changing their names. His Beverly Hills address matched what Ryan had stated. Tucker documented 55 specific facts Ryan had claimed about his past life. Of these 55 details, Tucker could verify information for 37 of them. Every single verifiable fact was accurate. Ryan knew about Martyn's multiple marriages, his career progression from dancer to agent, his travels, and personal details found only in archived records. There was no evidence Ryan or his family had access to these obscure historical documents before Ryan started making his claims. As Ryan grew older, the memories faded. By age 10, he rarely spoke about them, but the documented accuracy of his statements before information was verified remains scientifically intriguing. How could a child in Oklahoma know specific details about an obscure Hollywood agent who died decades before the child was born? The case remains one of the best documented examples of past life memory and is published in peer-reviewed scientific literature. Case number 3, Shanti Deva, Indian verification. Case Shanti Deva was born in Delhi, India in 1926. At age 4, she began insisting she had lived previously in the town of Mathura, about 90 miles from Delhi. She provided remarkable specific details about her previous life, including her former name Lugdi, who had died in childbirth. She described her husband, children, and house in Mathura with precise detail. Her parents initially dismissed this as fantasy, but Shanti's persistence in the specificity of her claims eventually made them take notice. Shanti described the house in Mathura, including its yellow color and unique architectural features. She named her former husband Kedar Nath and said she had 3 children in that life. She spoke in a dialect from the Mathura region, though she had never been there. She recognized items said to belong to Lugdi, despite never having seen them. The details were so specific and consistent that her case gained attention from researchers. A merchant from Mathura named Kedar Nath learned about Shanti's claims. He had been married to a woman named Lugdi, who died in 1925 during childbirth. The details Shanti provided matched Lugdi's life. Kedar Nath traveled to Delhi to meet Shanti. When he arrived, Shanti immediately recognized him, though she had never met him before in her current life. She demonstrated familiarity with him that shocked witnesses. Arrangements were made to take Shanti to Mathura. Upon arrival, she navigated the town's streets, directing people to Lugdi's former home, despite never having visited Mathura. She recognized the yellow house and correctly identified its interior layout. She recognized family members, calling them by their correct names and relationships. She knew details about Lugdi's life that were not public knowledge. She identified jewelry and personal items that had belonged to Lugdi. The case was investigated by multiple researchers, including a committee formed by Mahatma Gandhi. Witnesses documented Shanti's accurate recognition of people, places, and objects. Investigators found no evidence of fraud. Shanti had provided over 20 verifiable facts about Lugdi's life before visiting Mathura. The accuracy was documented in reports that were published in India. Shanti lived the rest of her life in Delhi. She remained convinced that she had been Lugdi in a previous existence. The case became one of the most cited examples of past life memory in reincarnation research. While the case is old and documentation is not as rigorous as modern standards, the sheer number of witnesses and verifiable details made it influential in establishing serious scientific investigation of such phenomena. The case demonstrated that whatever the explanation, children sometimes possess accurate knowledge about deceased people's lives that conventional memory cannot easily explain. Case number 4. Gus Taylor, grandfather, reincarnation. Gus Taylor was born in 2000 in the Midwestern United States. When he was 18 months old, he began making statements that disturbed his parents. He told his father, "When I was your age, I used to change your diapers." His father initially thought this was confused toddler talk, but Gus continued making statements suggesting he had been his own grandfather, Augustus Augie Taylor Sr., who died in 1984, 16 years before Gus was born. Gus made specific statements about Augie's life. He mentioned Augie's first car. He talked about Augie's sister who had been murdered. This particularly shocked the family because they had never told Gus about this tragedy. Augie's sister had been killed and her body found in the San Francisco Bay decades earlier. Gus described details about the murder that he could not have learned from family conversations. The family had deliberately not discussed the traumatic event around young children. Gus recognized photographs of Augie without being told who they were. When shown a family photo, he correctly identified which person was Augie, despite the photo being from before Gus's parents were born. He pointed to himself in the picture saying, "That's me." He talked about Augie's relationship with Gus's father, recalling events from when his father was young. He knew about family dynamics and history from the 1950s and 60s. The family noted Gus shared several characteristics with Augie. Both were left-handed, which runs in families but is not guaranteed. They had similar mannerisms. Gus showed interest in carpentry and building, which had been Augie's profession. These similarities, while not proof of reincarnation, added to the family's sense that Gus somehow carried Augie's memories or personality traits. As Gus grew older, the memories faded. By school age, he rarely mentioned his grandfather's past life. The family documented the statements in letters and records. While the case lacks the extensive independent verification of some other cases, the family's testimony and Gus's knowledge of details they had kept from him, particularly about his great-aunt's murder, make it compelling. The case represents a pattern seen in many past life memory reports. Children speak most about previous lives between ages 2 and 6. The memories involve someone who died before the child was born, often a relative. The child knows specific verifiable details. Then the memories fade as the child develops their own identity. Whether this represents actual reincarnation, some form of genetic memory, or an unexplained phenomenon remains scientifically unclear. But cases like Gus's continue to puzzle researchers studying consciousness and memory. Case number 5, Cameron Macaulay. Scottish Island Memories. Cameron Macaulay was born in Glasgow, Scotland in 2000. From age 2, he began talking constantly about his previous life on the island of Barra in the Outer Hebrides. He described a white house by the beach where he lived with his mother and siblings. He talked about his father, Shane Robertson, who had died. He spoke about planes landing on the beach in specific locations on Barra. Cameron had never been to Barra, and his family had no connection to the island. Cameron's mother, Norma, initially thought he had an imaginary friend, or was confusing television with reality. But Cameron's descriptions were too detailed and consistent. He drew pictures of the White House. He described the view from the window. He talked about his black and white dog. He became distressed, saying he missed his Barra family and wanted to go home. He insisted his previous name was Robertson and that his father had died in an accident. Cameron's insistence became so intense it affected his well-being. He cried about missing his other family. Norma decided to investigate. She contacted researchers and eventually arranged to visit Barra. Cameron had provided few specific verifiable details, just the family name Robertson and descriptions of the house. There was no guarantee they would find anything. When they arrived on Barra, Cameron immediately recognized landmarks he had never seen. He directed them toward a location describing the route. They found a white house matching Cameron's descriptions. Research revealed a Robertson family had lived there. The father's name was not Shane, but the family confirmed there had been a Robertson man who died when his children were young, though not in the specific way Cameron described. The house matched Cameron's drawings in several respects, including the layout and the view from windows. Cameron recognized the location, immediately expressing relief at being there. However, many specific details Cameron had mentioned could not be verified. There were no records confirming all the family members he described. Some details matched while others did not. The case gained media attention when a television documentary followed Cameron's journey to Barra. Researchers noted the case was suggestive, but not conclusive. Cameron had correctly identified the island, a family name, and general features of a location he had never visited. However, the lack of precise documentation and the possibility of coincidence prevent the case from being as strong as some others. Cameron's memories faded after visiting Barra. He stopped talking about his previous life and integrated into normal childhood. His mother believes the visit provided closure, allowing Cameron to let go of the memories. Whether Cameron somehow accessed actual memories of a Robertson child or created an elaborate fantasy, incorporating coincidentally accurate details remains unknown. The case demonstrates both the intriguing aspects of past life memories and the difficulty of rigorous verification when specific documented details are limited. Case number 6. Chanai Choomalaiwong. Thai boy shooting memory. Chanai Choomalaiwong was born in Thailand in 1994. Around age 3, he began telling his grandmother that he had been a teacher named Buakai, who was shot and killed while riding a bicycle to school. He provided the name of his previous parents, the school where he taught, and the district where he had lived. He said he had been shot by 2 men on a motorcycle. He insisted his grandmother take him to his previous parents' house in a village several miles away. Chanai described specific details about Buakai's life, including family members and the location of his home. He spoke about teaching at a particular school. He described being murdered, saying 2 men on a motorcycle had shot him. His grandmother initially dismissed these claims, but Chanai's persistence led her to investigate. She learned that a teacher named Buakai Lanak had indeed been murdered in exactly the manner Chanai described. Buakai had been shot while riding his bicycle to school. The murder remained unsolved. Chanai's grandmother contacted Buakai's parents. When they met Chanai, he immediately recognized them as his parents from his previous life. He knew details about the family and the house that a child from another village would not know. He recognized neighbors and friends. He led them to Buakai's home and identified possessions. The family was astonished by Chanai's knowledge. They came to believe he was Buakai reincarnated. Chanai identified one of the men he claimed had killed him. He saw a man in the village and became agitated, saying that man had shot him in his previous life. The man Chanai identified was known to have been involved in criminal activities, though never charged with Buakai's murder. The accusation was not pursued legally, but added to the case's intrigue. Could a child somehow know details about an unsolved murder? Researchers documented that Chanai had birthmarks on the back of his head and on his body that matched the entry and exit wounds where Buakai had been shot. Some reincarnation researchers note that birthmarks corresponding to previous life wounds appear in a percentage of cases, though skeptics argue this could be coincidence. The case was investigated by Dr. Jim Tucker and Dr. Jürgen Kehl, who verified many of Chanai's statements. He had provided over 10 specific accurate facts about Buakai's life before meeting the family. As Chanai grew older, the memories faded, but the documented accuracy of his statements in the birthmark correspondence make this one of the more compelling Asian cases, showing patterns researchers find repeatedly in these investigations. Case number 7, Purnima Ekanayake, Sri Lankan incense maker. Purnima Ekanayake was born in Sri Lanka in 1985 in Bakamuna. From age 3, she began making statements about a previous life in Kataragama, a town over 100 miles away. She described making incense sticks and selling them at a temple. She provided the name of her previous father and details about the business. She talked about a traffic accident, saying a bus had killed her while she was on her bicycle carrying incense to the temple. She said her previous name was Jinadasa. Purnima's family had no connection to Kataragama. They initially ignored her claims, but Purnima's descriptions were detailed and consistent. She knew the incense-making process, describing how to mix ingredients and create the sticks. She talked about specific locations in Kataragama and the temple where she sold incense. She mentioned her previous father's name was Wijakun. Her persistence led her family to investigate. Research confirmed that a young man had been killed in a traffic accident in Kataragama, matching the details Purnima described. His name was Jinadasa. He had made and sold incense at the Kataragama temple. His father's name was indeed Wijakun. The accident had occurred when a bus struck Jinadasa while he was riding his bicycle. The accident happened in 1983, 2 years before Purnima was born. Dr. Erlendur Haraldsson, a psychology professor, investigated the case extensively. He documented that Purnima made over 25 accurate statements about Jinadasa's life before any contact with the family. When arrangements were made for Purnima to visit Kataragama, she recognized the town and the temple. She identified Jinadasa's father and family members. She knew details about the incense business and the family home. Purnima exhibited behaviors consistent with someone in the incense trade. She showed familiarity with the manufacturing process. She recognized tools and ingredients. She knew the route to the temple where incense was sold. Witnesses documented that her knowledge exceeded what a child from Bakamuna would know about Kataragama's geography and the incense business. Like other cases, Purnima's memories faded as she grew older. By adolescence, she rarely discussed them. The case is notable for the extensive independent investigation by Dr. Haraldsson, who found no evidence of prior contact between the families or ways Purnima could have learned the information conventionally. The geographic distance between the two towns and the specific technical knowledge about incense making that Purnima demonstrated make the case difficult to explain through normal means. Whether this represents genuine past life memory or some other unexplained phenomenon, the documented facts remain puzzling. Case number 8, Patrick Christenson, birthmark arterial defect. Patrick Christenson was born in Michigan in 1991. His case is unusual because it was a same-family reincarnation claim. Patrick's older half-brother Kevin had died of cancer in 1979 at age 12 years before Patrick was born. Kevin had neuroblastoma that metastasized. He had a tumor on his ear and underwent a biopsy that left a scar. He also had a central venous line inserted on the right side of his neck for treatment. When Patrick was born, he had a birthmark on his left ear in the same location Kevin's tumor had been. He also had a slanting birthmark on the right side of his neck, matching where Kevin's central line had been inserted. The correspondence was striking, but could be coincidental. What made the case remarkable was Patrick's behavior and statements as he grew older. Around age 4, Patrick began making statements suggesting he remembered being Kevin. He asked his mother about the small brown house where they lived when Kevin was alive, though Patrick had never lived there. He knew details about the house and the family's circumstances from that period. He talked about surgeries and medical procedures. He showed fear of doctors that seemed beyond normal childhood anxiety. Patrick mentioned Kevin's dog, saying he wanted to see his old dog. Kevin had a dog that died before Patrick was born. Patrick knew the dog's name without being told. He talked about wanting toys that had been Kevin's favorites. He expressed knowledge of family events from the late 1970s that had not been discussed around him. His mother found this disturbing and compelling. Dr. Ian Stevenson investigated the case, documenting the birthmark correspondence in Patrick's statements. Stevenson had a particular interest in cases where birthmarks or birth defects matched wounds or physical features from the previous life. He documented hundreds of such cases worldwide. Patrick's birthmarks corresponding to Kevin's tumor and central line locations fit this pattern. The case raises questions about how birthmarks could match previous injuries. Conventional medicine has no mechanism for this. Skeptics argue coincidence or suggest unconscious family influence created the appearance of matching marks. However, in Patrick's case, the medical records precisely documented Kevin's tumor and central line locations, allowing objective comparison. Patrick's memories faded by age 7. The birthmarks remained, but he stopped mentioning Kevin or the previous life. The family was left to interpret the experience. Patrick's mother came to believe Patrick carried some connection to Kevin, though she remained uncertain what that meant. The case represents the type of evidence reincarnation researchers find most compelling: birthmarks or defects matching documented wounds, plus accurate memory statements. Whether this proves reincarnation or reveals some other unknown phenomenon remains debated among researchers studying consciousness and memory. Case number 9, Barbro Karlen, Anne Frank Memories. Barbro Karlen was born in Sweden in 1954. From a very young age, she insisted her name was not Barbro. She said her real name was Anne, and she came from another country. She had recurring nightmares about soldiers and hiding. She spoke about being trapped and dying young. Her Swedish parents had no connection to World War II victims, and initially thought these were childhood fears, perhaps from hearing war stories. Barbro wrote poetry from age very young, showing unusual maturity. She expressed feelings about injustice, persecution, and death that seemed beyond childhood understanding. She insisted she had lived before in Amsterdam. She described hiding in a house and being found by bad men. She talked about writing a diary. Her parents became concerned but didn't connect these statements to anything specific until Barbro was 10 years old. When Barbro's family traveled to Amsterdam, she insisted on finding her old house. Without directions, she led them through streets she had never visited to the Anne Frank house. She recognized the building immediately. Inside, she knew the layout before seeing it. She identified the hiding place. She became emotional, saying this was where she had lived and where she had been found. Her parents were shocked, having not realized Barbro's statements might refer to Anne Frank. Barbro later wrote a book about her experiences called "And the Wolves Howled," describing memories she believed were from a previous life as Anne Frank. She described similarities in personality, interest in writing, and feelings about the world. She noted experiencing Anne's emotional states, particularly the fear and hope that characterized the diary. Researchers have approached Barbro's case cautiously. Unlike cases involving young children making specific verifiable statements before information could be obtained, Barbro's conscious association with Anne Frank developed over years. The Anne Frank story is widely known, making it impossible to determine if Barbro somehow absorbed information culturally or genuinely remembered a past life. Skeptics suggest Barbro identified with Anne Frank's story and developed a psychological connection that felt like memory. Supporters note that Barbro's statements began before she knew about Anne Frank. Her navigation to the house in Amsterdam was striking. Her emotional reactions and detailed familiarity with the hiding place exceeded what reading the diary would provide. They argue something beyond normal identification occurred. The case differs from those involving young children who make specific statements verified before investigation. Barbro's claims developed over time, and involved a famous person whose story is widely known. This makes verification difficult and allows multiple interpretations. Whether Barbro experienced genuine past life memories or developed a profound psychological identification with Anne Frank cannot be definitively determined. The case illustrates challenges in investigating past life claims when the previous person is historically famous and information is widely available. Case number 10. Edward Austrian, Egyptian Architect Memories. Edward Austrian was born in England. As a young child, he began describing memories of ancient Egypt. Unlike many past life cases involving recent deaths, Edward's memories allegedly spanned thousands of years. He described being an architect during ancient Egyptian times working on temples. He provided details about ancient construction methods, architectural designs, and historical periods with remarkable specificity for a child. Edward's most striking claims involved the Temple of Seti I at Abydos. He described the temple's layout, decorations, and construction in extensive detail. He drew architectural plans matching actual temple designs. He described hieroglyphics and religious practices from ancient Egypt that he should not know. His family had no Egyptology background, and the child had no access to scholarly materials on ancient Egypt. As an adult, Edward traveled to Egypt. He demonstrated navigation of ancient sites as though he had been there before. He could walk through temples knowing the layout without maps. He identified rooms and features before seeing them. At Abydos, he showed familiarity with the Temple of Seti that impressed Egyptologists. He knew obscure details about construction and design not available in popular literature. Edward described ancient construction techniques, including methods for moving massive stone blocks and creating precise architectural alignments. Some of his descriptions matched scholarly understanding of ancient methods, while others suggested knowledge beyond what historians had documented. He described religious ceremonies and daily life in ancient Egypt with specificity that seemed to come from personal experience. The case is complicated by several factors. Edward's claims cannot be verified the way recent past life cases can. No records exist to confirm whether an architect with his described characteristics lived in ancient Egypt thousands of years ago. His detailed knowledge could have been obtained through intensive study, though he claims the memories came first before any research. Egyptologists who met Edward noted his knowledge was impressive, but acknowledged it could have been learned. Some found his navigational abilities at sites suggestive of something beyond book learning. Others remained skeptical, noting that dedicated study could produce similar results. Unlike cases involving recently deceased people where specific facts can be checked, Edward's ancient Egypt claims are impossible to verify conclusively. The case raises questions about whether past life memories could span millennia or whether Edward's knowledge represents something else. His architectural expertise and navigational abilities at Egyptian sites impress some observers. But without verifiable specific facts matching a documented individual, the case remains more speculative than others. It demonstrates the challenges in investigating alleged past life memories when they involve distant history rather than recent deaths where medical records, birth certificates, and living witnesses can verify claims. Edward's case remains an intriguing but ultimately inconclusive example in the literature on past life memories.